Hello and welcome to Amateur Radio Topics. I'm Kevin, VK6 Lima Whiskey and Victor Kilo 6 Tango in most contests. And this podcast is essentially a personal review of the recent Commonwealth Contest which was held last month, and the results have just been published. So this is a contest that enjoys a very strong and loyal following throughout the Commonwealth countries. Most of the activity is from the UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. There's quite a bit of other activity that's generated by travellers that go off to faraway exotic locations, normally on a de-expedition type basis to operate in the contest, and that certainly adds a degree of interest and some very useful bonus points on all the bands. So we really appreciate those guys going off to these locations, and I think this year there was certainly some in the Mediterranean. Caribbean was well represented, and also the Falkland Islands with an activation from VP8. So that was very much appreciated indeed. There was a number of rule changes this year. There's a lot of consultation in the lead up to the contest with a lot of ideas that were put forward, and generally speaking, I would say that the rule changes that have occurred, I would say have made a difference. I think it was there's some very good rule changes in there. Everybody will have an opinion on this, but this is just my opinion. So the scoring has changed, and essentially if you contact somebody from outside your own continent, then the points are doubled. They're doubled from 5 to 10 points per QSO. And this does have a bearing for different parts of the world. Certainly for myself, for example, contacting mainly the UK or Canada, then I will receive those 10 points, which looks very good because everybody's on the same footing. Potential disadvantage for VKZL is that particularly on the second day for us, if things are quiet, the only QSOs available to us are not outside of our own continent. They're within Australia or New Zealand. And just to try and put that in some sort of context, I live in Perth, so if I contact somebody in New Zealand, it's around about a 5,000 kilometre path. So it's hardly a local QSO, but in this instance, I'm still contacting somebody in the same continent. On the other hand, one of the other rule changes helps to compensate for this, and that is that the UK entities have been split into separate components. So if you work a GM or a GW or a GI, etc., then all of those stations count for separate bonus points, and that's a big advantage for overseas stations, because the G stations, the UK stations that are just general Gs, cannot work those other entities. They can't work the GMs and the GIs. So it means that overseas stations have a source of bonuses in this contest which are not accessible to Gs. Now, that may not be so good either. On the other hand, the Gs probably get a little bit more advantage by being able to work the HQ stations. So the HQ stations also count for bonus points. If you're not familiar with this contest, the scoring system's not entirely straightforward, because there's QSO points and then there's bonus points, and the first 3 call areas on each band count for extra bonus points. Probably won't go too much into the rules because this could be a very long podcast, but sufficient to say that they are available on the RSGB website or the HF Contest Committee website, or Bob GTPJT's website. You can access the rules there, have a look at the new rules. The new rules are really designed to try and get more activity. That's the main point of this contest. It's not always easy on a contest weekend for the Commonwealth Contest to gain some traction on the bands, because there's other contests that also are competing for the same band space. So activity is pretty important on a number of levels. The other major rule change is that the administration or the governance of the contest has been decided to be shared between other Commonwealth countries, namely Canada, Australia, New Zealand and India. So that also has some bearing on the publicity, and the idea is that these individual countries, our members of the Commonwealth, will conduct their own activity and also conduct their own awards programs. And I can probably come back to that a little bit later on, but there are more awards now for this contest because of the shared governance of the contest. And again, you can go onto the various websites and you can look up exactly what's been changed and how this may affect the contest. Now, none of us really know how this is going to work. I mean, obviously, this is the first contest in with these new rule changes, but it's not the first time that rules have been changed in the Commonwealth Contest over the years. And of course, with any rule change, you get people that are very much in favour of it, and they really want to make some changes that they think could be advantageous to the contest moving forward. And you get a lot of other people that perhaps don't want any changes at all. And that's completely understandable. As I say, it's got a very strong, loyal following, and many of the people that participate in this contest on a yearly basis have been doing so for 40, 50 years and even longer. Myself, I think I first played around in this contest, it was at least 40 years ago. I've been licensed nearly 50 years, and this was back in the UK. And he had fairly simple equipment, so my involvement with this contest probably goes back maybe 46 or 47 years. But my personal view is that we need to try and do what we can to engage new operators, and that's really important. There's a lot of ideas that we obviously can change this contest, keep the current format. But I think moving forward, eventually, we have to look at a little bit more expansion by organic means and try and get more people involved in the Commonwealth Contest. And I may just touch on this a little bit later on. So, onto the scores, onto the results. Well, conditions to start with were pretty good. As is so often the case with Baru, the first 12 hours are normally very good, but it can be a problem after that. So, but the first 12 hours, certainly in VK6, the conditions sounded great. There was a lot of activity. The participation rate seems to have gone up, possibly in UK and VE. This year, for various reasons, the participation rate in VK and ZL seemed to be down. There were some local problems with that. We had a cyclone over in VK4 in Queensland, and there was virtually no VK4 activity. I noticed in the results there are some VK4 stations that have put a score in, but I personally did not hear any VK4 stations on any band. So that creates us with a potential problem here locally in terms of activity. The conditions at the start were very much better than the conditions at the finish. Probably around about halfway through the contest, I think just before the halfway mark, there was a fairly decent disturbance, and the A index was very high, as was the K index. Bands were very disturbed. There's a lot of flutter-on signals, a lot of skew paths on the low bands, made the low bands very challenging, made 40 and 80 very difficult. So it's a contest of two halves, I guess. But essentially, that's always been the same in Baru. The activity in the first 12 hours is disproportionately higher than the second 12 hours. And whilst there's a lot of guys operating in the 24-hour section, the 12-hour section has become extremely popular, whether that be 12 hours high power, 12 hours assisted, unassisted, low power, or whatever. The 12-hour section seems to be the content or the category that a lot of people are getting attracted to, and that may be to do with the demographic that's taking part in this contest and the aging demographic that is heading towards 12 hours rather than 24 hours, and I can understand that for sure. But I think what's happening, and I've thought it for a while, is that not just with this contest and not because of the rule changes, but after the 12 hours, the contest, notwithstanding the conditions, of course, the contest really in VK fell off a cliff. And it appears that looking at some of the other scores and looking at the analysis on the website, it appears that this was very much the case. The scoring in the second 10 to 12 hours of the contest was very low. So I've kind of got the idea that some of the guys are just signing up for the first 12 hours and they're switching off. They've done their 12 hours and that's it, and they've probably had the best of the activity. And in this case, they certainly had the best of the conditions. There's no doubt about that at all. And whilst it's understandable, I think one of the problems this year was that the increase in activity, from what I can see, appears to be more prevalent in the 12-hour category. So whilst the participation rate looks like it's up, notwithstanding the problems we've got in VK, if all that activity is concentrated in the first 12 hours, but there's people not really hanging in there for the second 12 hours, you can kind of understand the effect that would have. So it would be really nice to have a contest where obviously it's a little bit more balanced, and there's been a number of, after the contest, there's been a number of ideas kicked around by a few people personally and on emails about what you can do to get people on for the second 12 hours. And there are some things that could be done. And but it's not, again, nobody would really know what effect that would have until you actually put those plans in place, put those changes in place. So the VEs, once again, have done very well in this contest. I'm just looking at the scores here. High power single operator assisted. V3J has got a phenomenal station. Very good operator, John. He's 24 hours and he's put in a fantastic score. 926 QSOs here. So yes, that's not. He's been at the top of this before. He generally speaking operates in the assisted category, and he quite often takes that one out. The second place actually is interesting. V3JM. Now he's also a fantastic operator, and he's got a great station. He only did 12 hours, 676 QSOs. Came in with a QSO total of 11,450, which is also a fabulous score. So you have to go down the list here. You've got 5before AMX, who was a great signal here actually in Perth. Very good operator. He did 24 hours, 677 QSOs. And then the rest are 24-hour entrants. And you've got to go down to V3CT before you find another 12-hour entrant. So you'd really expect high power single operator assisted to be all 24-hour operations, but the V3JM snuck in there at 12 hours, had the best of the conditions, and then finished up. So I'm not sure in his case that was really the way he operated, but it is possible for that to happen. Or the second 12 hours are very limited. And then we go down and we start seeing more of a mix here of the 12 and the 24 hours. GT2BK had a very good signal here on all bands. He's put in a good score from the UK. And of course G3BJ, who's always figures very prominently in this contest, he's also done very well with a very good bonus total as well. So yeah, high power single operator unassisted. There's a fair there's 85 participants or 85 entries in that. There would be more participants, of course. There's people that don't send in a log, or they send in a chat log on. So can't always tell. So then we go to high power single operator unassisted and XL3A. Now XL3A I could hear just about on any band, certainly on the HF bands, for long periods of time. It's a fantastic signal. And I know he's got a very good setup there. 916 QSOs, 14,000 points. So he's edged out Colin ZF2CA, who has also got a very good signal. It's a great station down there, the Cayman Islands, and he normally travels to ZF to do this. He's put in a very good score, but pretty hard to beat that score from XL3A. And XL3A, ZF2CA, they're both tremendous operators, and they're both in good locations to take advantage of the high number of QSOs you can get to G. And of course, they would have been getting the extra 10 or the extra points, the extra points for contacts outside their own continent as well. So third place there, Andy 5Z4G VJ. Yep, he's another great operator. 11,390, very good score indeed. And then another 5B4 who is also a very good signal here, 5B4WN. So all 24-hour entrants. Dave, G4BUO, who I met briefly in Perth before he went off on his travels to New Zealand, he put in a great score. He went down to ZL3IO's place and put in a really nice score from there. As he points out, it's not easy getting to grips with the propagation and the conditions on the other side of the globe. So he did really well, Dave, and congratulations to him. I was just slightly behind him, so I was not unhappy with that result at all. And then my good friend Graham, G4FNL, who I actually went to school with. And he went to, I think it was G0DWV station, who's got a pretty good setup there. I think Graham's been there before. Anyway, he's put in a very good score from the UK there. So well done. There's a few. I noticed here Andy G4PIQ put in a great score for 12 hours. 7,200 there, very good. So and then we've got a few others here. We've got Alan VK2GR, who's got a good station over there in New South Wales, and I think he suffered a bit in the second half of the contest with activity being quite low, and also the effects of the cyclone over on the east coast, which increased a lot of noise levels locally. So yeah, there's some interesting scores in there. ZD7BG. Now, I didn't hear ZD7BG at all. I wish I had, but it's not an easy path from Perth, so might explain why I didn't catch him. I noticed he wasn't really active. He was mainly active on the HF bands by the look of it here. So that's a pretty good score. So the nice thing about Baru, I think, is that it has these sections. It has the unassisted, the assisted, the low power unassisted. I think that's all. It's good because not everybody's got a super station. Not everybody's got multiple stack beams, and it's nice to see that you've got that sort of spread across the activity in a number of different sections. Here's the VK6LW. So yes, I think it was just 12 hours there, and he maybe wasn't quite as active there as Nigel was, I think. I haven't just come across Nigel's score here. So, and then low power, single operator assisted, and so we go down. So VK3KI, yeah, I mean, he's a good operator, 24 hours, and he's put in a great score, 8,255. Very good indeed. So, and this is a contest where you can actually do quite well with low power, because for various reasons, in theory, the QRM level is a bit lower. I mean, this is not necessarily always the case now, because we're competing with lots of other contests that happen to be on the same weekend. Well, I say lots. I mean, there's maybe 2 or 3, but it does have an effect in terms of the occupancy of the band. But in general, a lot of the DX stations arguably are more available in this type of contest than a contest where, so you compare it with, say, CQ Worldwide, but the noise levels are elevated by 10 or 15 dB sometimes on some of the bands, and it can be much harder to work DX. So there's a pretty good entry there in the low power single operator assisted, and I think if we go down to the unassisted here, so we've got G4SGX/6Y. I've worked him on a few bands, and he was a good signal. So single operator unassisted, low power. I mean, it was scores 10,000 points. It was fantastic. And G3VYO and 8.9YO, yes, I heard him and worked him on a few bands as well, and he also had a very good signal. So 9H1CG, I think he's been in this contest many years before, and he was very easy to work. And nice to hear G3LET there as well. He, I think he was just using an all-wire station, but as usual, he was quite a good signal, and he wasn't difficult to work at all. So just going down the list at all, I'd never heard VP2MMN, unfortunately. Again, I wish I had. Caribbean's not that easy to work for VK6 actually. So and then of course, you know, some of these stations like GW6GW and GW7W, they would have been more in demand because of the GW prefix, essentially because they were counted as a separate entity in the UK. And that's never happened before. The UK, I don't think it's ever happened before. The UK is normally always one entity. But now all of a sudden, GI, GW, GM, they're all in demand. And that can only be a good thing. And I think you might find people are starting to look seriously. Well, we maybe don't need to go to the Caribbean or the Mediterranean. We could just go to a rare UK entity and get a bit of traction in this contest. So we've got 80 participants here, or 80 entries in the low power unassisted. So that's very good. Multi-operator section. So 986A, yeah, it was a great signal, as was V9ML. Worked him, I think, on the long path on 80, which was really, really nice. So nice to see some multi-operator stations there, and some good scores. And then we've got the HQ section. So this is one by Dave, V3KG. He was a great signal. And pretty hotly contested. And if you go down, we've got 14 entrants in the HQ section. Now, I suppose it's fair to say not all of them are necessarily super serious, but there's a little bit of a competition going on at the top here, in the top, maybe 4 or 5 stations, and very serious. So the HQ section has become an event all in itself. And I think, I guess the thing with the HQ stations is they can work everybody. They can work all the guys in the UK, or if they're in VE, they can work all the guys in their own call areas. And so it changes the complexity of what they can work and the scores they can achieve. So, some pretty good scores here, and high bonus numbers. And again, it increases the interest and the activity from within the contest. Generally speaking, all these guys here, they've all got pretty good stations. These guys up at the top here, they're good operators, so they're relatively easy to work. And then we come down to the QRP guys. Well, I've really got to admire these guys for what they've been able to achieve here. And there's some, really 3,000 points in the Commonwealth Contest with 5 watts. So, well, that's a fantastic score from G4ZFE. There's no doubt. And some of I do recall working. I haven't gone through my log specifically, but I do recall working some of these guys. I think I worked GM4M, so it's possible in Baru to work stations with just 5 watts. So if we go back up here now and we just get back to the QSO analysis bit, here we go. This is quite interesting. So you can see as the contest has gone on, get the HF bands here, just how much the activity drops away. This is on the HF bands. This is across all the members of the Commonwealth. So here, there's nothing happening. It's non-existent. And this is my experience in the second 12 hours. Very, very low indeed. There was a bit more happening on 7 megs for other stations. Maybe not for me. Maybe towards the end of the contest, I've managed to get into this bit here, but there wasn't much going on really on 7 megs here at all either for me. And so you could say that's the same for the whole of VKZL perhaps. The Eastern States VKs get more traction on 7 megs towards the end of the contest because they can start to work maybe some of the Gs on the long path. And on 80 meters, well, certainly for in VK, most of the activity is in this first part here, and then through to UK sunset. And you get a little bit of activity there if the conditions allow it, and then you get a little bit around about the UK, VK6 in my case, sunrise. So 80 meters is a hard band. You've really got to be on there at the right time, right place, right time to work stuff from Australia, and you've got to have a fairly decent setup. So that's pretty well a wrap up of the scores. I really enjoyed the contest this year. Had a lot of fun, despite the fact that things were very low for me on the second part of the contest with really not many QSOs. It's not a new problem. I think it's a problem that could be addressed, but it needs maybe a little bit more radical action than what we've got at the moment in terms of the situation and the rules. The radical action would be to open this contest up, try and make it something that has a worldwide participation with a focus on the Commonwealth. Similar to what a lot of other contests are. You have a lot of contests throughout the year that have a focus on a region, say Japan or Croatia or Spain or wherever, but it's a worldwide participation. And of course, it would change the complexity of the contest, but there's a couple of things that would happen if that rule was introduced. And number one is we would definitely get some more activity in the second half of the contest, because certainly in Australia, even if the conditions are bad, we've still got good north-south activity. And unfortunately, there's really no Commonwealth Contest north-south from VK. So that's probably the first thing that would happen. And the second thing that would happen is that I know we've got other national societies that have been co-opted now into the governance of the Commonwealth Contest. And I don't think it's a bad thing at all. And they will provide more publicity. Whether or not that publicity gets a great deal of recognition is very hard to say. I think the publicity for Commonwealth Contest over the years, every year it seems to be that in order to get some results, you've really got to double down on the marketing of this contest to get people to take notice and to get people interested. And one of the problems with trying to get people interested in the current format essentially is that you've got a situation where if somebody was to tune into this contest in the second half of the contest, they're going to think, well, where is the contest? Now I'm talking about a new operator. I'm talking about somebody that's maybe new to CW, wants to get involved in the contest, wants to work some DX. And there's nothing going on. If they miss the start of the contest, they come in on the Sunday, in my case, particularly if they're in VK6L, there's nothing happening. So it's not a particularly easy contest to sell at the moment to new operators. And it doesn't matter which way we look at it. I'm not getting any younger. There's a lot of other operators in this contest that have been, as I say, been doing it 40, 50, 60 years. And some of them don't really want any of this to change. And I can understand that in a way. But on the other hand, I think that you'd like to consider that the contest will go on to prosper. And the only way that's going to happen is if you get a younger demographic involved. And there are younger CW operators out there. There's many clubs and societies, and certainly in Europe, the US and the UK, that are actively promoting CW. And there's really no shortage of CW on the bands if you go on during a contest. It's fairly easily demonstrated. Sometimes the bands can sound completely flat. A contest pops up and all of a sudden the station's everywhere. So we can't rely upon all the people that are my age to keep this contest going. If you want to look at 10, 20 or 30 years into the future, you have to find a way to get more people from a younger demographic interested. And one way would be to obviously open it up, get a little bit more activity, and try and get a bit more band coverage as well, so that other contests don't encroach as easily onto the Commonwealth, because we're a pretty easy contest to push aside at the moment on the bands. Certainly that's my perspective from VK. So I think these things should all be discussed, and it's that particular viewpoint did receive some support, but I think the status quo being what it was, and the fear of change from some people meant that it was probably just not going to happen this year. But I think moving forward, particularly as at the moment we're in a sunspot maximum, this is a really good opportunity to consider this. If you leave it to the sunspot minimum, well, this is a really tough contest. And maybe if you leave it to the sunspot minimum, then it's inevitable. You have to open it up to get enough participants and get enough interest, and also to capture the imagination of some younger operators that actually do want to go on and work a number of stations. The unique nature of the Commonwealth is something that I understand, because I've been competing in this contest for a long time. I understand the unique nature of it. I understand the fact that it's not a rate contest. But it's a hard thing to sell when younger operators want to get involved and be part of a vibrant contest, because it doesn't, to the outsider looking on, it doesn't sound, as I say, much is happening. It sounds a bit flat. So there we are. We move on to next year, I guess, and see what happens. If you pop onto certainly it'd be on Bob G3PJT's website. He publishes the results. There's normally a write-up in the RSGB Radcom magazine as well. There's a whole list of new awards that seem to have come about from the publicity and the shared governance. And I think that won't do any harm. That's a really good thing to have there. And any publicity is good publicity. So 73s for now from me, Kevin, VK6 Lima Whiskey, and see you in the next contest.